In the quiet shadows of a city street, a scream tore through the night, a little girl begging for mercy, her voice raw with fear. No one else moved, no one else came. But in that moment, a man who had built empires yet carried an empty heart stepped forward. He didn't know her name, didn't know her story, but what he chose to do in that alley would change both of their lives forever. This isn't just a story of rescue. It's a story of healing, of courage, and of finding family in the most unexpected place. Stay with us, because what begins in darkness leads to a light that will touch your soul. And if you believe that stories like this deserve to be told, make sure to subscribe to the Retold Stories, where hope is never lost and every tale finds its way home. The late afternoon sky over Seattle was the color of bruised steel, heavy clouds pressing down as if they carried the weight of every broken promise the city had ever known. Ryan Mitchell stepped out of the tower that bore his name, his polished shoes clicking against the damp pavement. His phone buzzed insistently in his pocket, but he ignored it, craving silence. After another boardroom battle, another hollow victory, he needed air more than he needed power. He turned down a narrow side street behind the Rosewood Cafe, where the noise of the city softened into a quiet murmur. The scent of wet concrete lingered in the air, sharp and raw, and cigarette butts dotted the curb like forgotten confessions. Ryan's eyes caught on a crumpled takeout box near a dumpster. For reasons he couldn't explain, he stopped to stare at it, as if it might offer answers to questions he never asked out loud. He had wealth beyond measure, influence that stretched across continents, yet he felt like a hollow man. I built an empire, he thought bitterly, and I still eat alone. That was when he heard it, a sound so small, yet so piercing that it seemed to slice through the drizzle and the shadows alike. A voice, high and desperate, trembled through the alley. "Please stop. I can't take it." The words clung to the damp brick walls, echoing like a plea that had been repeated far too many times. Ryan's body reacted before his mind had time to catch up. His legs carried him forward, breath quickening, fists curling tight in the pockets of his wool coat. As he rounded the corner, the sight rooted itself deep inside him. A little girl, no more than 6, stood pressed against the cold bricks. Her mismatched shoes and crooked coat spoke of neglect, her small hands raised to shield her face. In front of her loomed a man, late 30s, unshaven, the sour stench of whiskey clinging to his breath. His arm was raised mid-swing. "Hey!" Ryan's voice rang out low and sharp. The man spun, eyes glassy and furious, startled like a wild animal caught mid-attack. Ryan stepped forward, planting himself between the child and the threat. He didn't shout again. Didn't need to. His gaze was steady, his stance unshaken, and the silence between his words was louder than any roar. The man faltered, his hand trembling as he lowered it. "Mind your business," he spat. His words wavered with false bravado. "She's a child," Ryan said, his voice calm but edged with steel. "And this ends now." Something in Ryan's eyes held the man. A kind of fearlessness, forged not from violence, but from conviction. For a moment, the aggressor seemed poised to resist, but then he flinched. Muttering curses, he stumbled backward, his figure dissolving into the shadows until only silence remained. Ryan exhaled slowly, realizing his heart pounded harder than it had during billion-dollar negotiations. He turned, lowering himself carefully so he could meet the girl's gaze. She was trembling, her lip bloodied, her chest rising and falling in sharp bursts. He made sure his hands were visible, gentle, non-threatening. "It's okay now," he whispered. "He's gone." The girl didn't answer, her wide eyes fixed on him, mistrusting, unblinking. Slowly, Ryan shrugged out of his coat and held it out. "You're cold, aren't you?" His voice softened. Still, she hesitated. Then, like a ghost daring to step into the world of the living, she edged forward, one small step, another. Finally, she pressed herself against his side, disappearing into the folds of his coat. She said nothing, but the way her little hands clutched the fabric told him everything. The weight of her against him was almost nothing, yet it carried more heaviness than every acquisition, every deal, every empire he had ever built. She hadn't screamed when the man raised his voice. She hadn't run when danger loomed. That kind of silence wasn't strength. It was survival. And it told Ryan more than words ever could. He looked around the empty alley. No witnesses. No comfort. Just him, a frightened child, and a truth he couldn't ignore. He had no plan, no training, no groceries waiting at home. But he knew one thing for certain. He would not walk away. Inside the Rosewood Cafe, the air was warm with the aroma of coffee and sugar, fogging the windows against the chill. Ryan guided her inside, her small figure still hidden in his coat. Curious glances flicked their way, but no one asked questions. He led her to a booth in the corner where the noise softened into background hum. She sat stiffly across from him, arms folded, eyes downcast, as though shrinking from the world itself. A waitress approached, uncertainty in her eyes. "Everything all right?" she asked gently. Ryan nodded. "Hot cocoa, extra marshmallows." His tone left no room for more questions. The waitress gave a quick nod and disappeared. Ryan leaned forward, voice soft. "Do you want to tell me your name?" Silence. He tried again, introducing himself instead. "I'm Ryan." Still nothing, only her gaze fixed on a crack in the table. When the cocoa came, she reached for the mug with both hands. But her hands shook so hard, the cup slipped, spilling across the table. She gasped, eyes wide, frozen in terror. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice breaking. "Please, don't be mad." Ryan picked up a napkin and gently blotted the spill. "It's okay," he said quietly. "It's just cocoa." She blinked at him, confusion flickering in her eyes, as though she had expected anger, perhaps even worse. "He said I ruin everything," she murmured. Ryan's chest tightened, fury pushing against his ribs, but he forced his voice steady. "Who said that?" She gave no answer, but she didn't need to. The silence said enough. The rain outside tapped against the windows like restless fingers. Inside, she pressed her hand to the glass, tracing the trails of water. Fragile, delicate, but alive. Ryan watched her, realizing with a clarity he hadn't known before. He couldn't leave her. Not here, not ever. "Come on," he said gently, rising to his feet. She looked up, startled. "Where?" "My car." He lifted his coat again, wrapping it snugly around her. It swallowed her small frame until she looked like a child, playing dress-up in clothes far too big. Yet to him, she looked exactly as she was, someone who needed protection, and someone he would not fail. As they stepped into the rain, he instinctively reached for her hand. She flinched slightly but didn't let go. When she looked up at him and whispered, "I won't be a problem," his heart cracked. He crouched, meeting her eyes. "That's not what I'm worried about." She blinked, silent, then climbed into the car. Ryan slid into the driver's seat, the engine humming to life, the heater pushing warm air through the cabin. He glanced at her, small and quiet, huddled against the seat. She wasn't his responsibility. She wasn't part of his plan. And yet, deep in his chest, he already knew he wasn't going to let her face the dark alone again. The urgent care clinic near downtown was not the kind of place that offered comfort. Its flickering lights hummed like tired machinery, and the smell of antiseptic clung to every corner, mixing with burnt coffee from a pot that looked years too old. Ryan stepped through the sliding doors, the child wrapped in his coat and clinging to his side. She had not spoken a word during the ride, her gaze fixed on the rain-streaked window, her arms wrapped so tightly around herself that he wondered how she managed to breathe. The receptionist barely looked up at first, her face frozen in the expression of someone who had seen too much and cared too little. But when her eyes landed on the girl, she paused, hesitated, and then silently pushed a clipboard forward. Ryan did not reach for it. "She has been hurt," he said, his voice sharp enough to cut through the stale air. "She needs help now." Something in his tone convinced her. She reached for the phone. Within minutes, a nurse appeared and ushered them inside. Ryan sat in a stiff plastic chair as the girl, whose name he finally learned was Emma, perched on the edge of an examination table. She clutched a worn stuffed penguin pulled from her backpack, holding it to her chest like a shield. The nurse practitioner introduced herself as Maya Thompson, her voice gentle, her manner calm but firm. She spoke to Emma as if she were whole, not broken, careful not to speak down to her. Sweetheart, can I take a look at you? Maya asked softly. Emma stayed silent. Ryan tried to answer, but Maya raised a hand. It's okay. We go at her pace. Slowly, she helped Emma into a gown and began to examine her arms, ribs, and shoulders with patient care. Ryan's jaw clenched as he noticed faint bruises, old and new. When Maya's fingers brushed over one rib, Emma flinched. Cracked, Maya murmured quietly to Ryan, her eyes darkening. Painful, but not life-threatening. And these bruises are from different times. She gently lifted Emma's small arm, revealing the outline of a fresh handprint. Ryan felt his stomach twist. He had read statistics before, seen reports of abuse, but this was different. Here was a child folding herself into silence, as though shrinking to avoid notice. Maya reached into her pocket and handed Emma a glittery penguin sticker. Emma took it without a word and pressed it to the belly of her stuffed toy. Maya pulled Ryan aside, speaking low. You need to call Child Protective Services. She cannot go back to whoever did this. Ryan's throat tightened. I cannot leave her to strangers, not again. But if you want to keep her safe, there is one option. Emergency foster placement. Temporary, but it keeps her with you while things get sorted out. Ryan hesitated. The thought of raising a child, even for a few days, was foreign to him. He had closed deals worth billions, commanded boardrooms, but he had never known how to soothe a crying child or cook a proper meal. I don't know anything about raising her, he admitted. Maya gave a small, knowing smile. You seem to know something about protecting her. That is more than most. Later, Ryan found Emma sitting on a bench in the hallway, her legs swinging back and forth. The penguin rested in her lap, now marked by the glitter sticker, like a badge of survival. He crouched down beside her. Would you like to come with me for a little while? He asked gently. She did not answer, but her hand slipped into his without hesitation. That night, Ryan stood in the doorway of his condo's guest room. Emma was curled on the bed, fast asleep in an oversized t-shirt, the penguin tucked beneath her chin. The city lights outside glittered across the glass, cold and impersonal, but inside the silence felt different. For the first time in years, Ryan did not feel entirely alone. The next morning was filled with awkwardness. Ryan, unused to kitchens, stood barefoot in front of a mixing bowl, filled with gray, lumpy batter. He poured it into a pan, and within seconds, smoke curled upward. His attempt at pancakes was a disaster, but behind him, a small giggle rang out. He turned to see Emma standing in the doorway, her hair tangled, her eyes brighter than he had seen before. You burned it, she said between quiet laughs. Ryan laughed too, a sound that surprised even himself. Completely, but maybe we can call them penguin pancakes. She giggled harder, pointing at the pan as if the mess looked like her stuffed toy had fallen in. That morning, for the first time, Ryan felt the air shift. Her laughter filled corners of his home that had been silent for years. Later, as Emma drew with crayons at the table, she slid a paper toward him. A tall man, a little girl with pigtails, and a penguin stood beneath a sun with too many rays. This is us, she whispered. Ryan felt something catch in his throat. He pinned the drawing to the fridge with a magnet, as though it belonged there all along. Maya visited that afternoon, bringing groceries, supplies, and a calm presence. Emma ran to her instantly, hugging her tightly, a sign that trust was not impossible after all. Ryan stood back, watching, realizing that the world he had built on money and walls was shifting into something fragile but real. As the days passed, Emma began to laugh more, draw more, and even ask small questions. She sat at his kitchen counter, legs dangling, her voice timid but curious. Do you live here all by yourself? She asked one morning. Ryan nodded. Until now, he replied, pouring syrup onto her pancakes. But shadows still lingered. At night, Emma sometimes startled awake, clutching the penguin tight, her wide eyes searching for reassurance. Ryan would sit at her side until her breathing steadied, whispering softly that she was safe. And slowly, she began to believe him. Ryan's assistant left messages. His CFO called. Investors demanded updates, but Ryan typed a single email to his COO, I am stepping back, handle everything. Her reply came quickly. We've got this. Take care of what matters. For the first time in years, Ryan realized work could wait. The little girl sitting on his couch, whispering, "You don't get mad when I spill things," mattered far more than any empire ever could. And with each passing day, he understood more deeply that he was no longer rescuing her. They were rescuing each other. The rain had not stopped in days. It pressed against the wide windows of Ryan's penthouse, the gray sky draping Seattle in a muted hush. Once, he would have hated the gloom, letting it echo his own loneliness. Now, the sound was only background noise to the life beginning to grow inside his home. Emma sat cross-legged on the living room rug, her crayons scattered in every direction. A fort of blankets and pillows stood like a small kingdom behind her. Her penguin, freshly stitched, stood guard at the entrance, as if protecting her world from the shadows outside. Ryan leaned against the kitchen doorway, arms folded, a quiet smile tugging at his lips. The silence he had once worshipped felt different now. It was not emptiness anymore. It was filled with her humming, her small giggles, and the occasional burst of questions. At dinner, she wrinkled her nose at his grilled cheese. "Only if you don't burn it," she teased, and her toothy grin made his chest ache in a way that was almost sweet. Life, for a moment, felt simple. But the illusion cracked one rainy evening. Emma had just finished her bath, the steam still fogging the mirror in the hall. Ryan noticed her at the window, standing far too still. When he stepped closer, he saw her eyes fixed on the street below. Under a flickering street lamp, a tall figure lingered, a shadow watching. Ryan moved quickly, pulling the curtain closed. "Stay here," he told her, his voice firm but calm. He grabbed his coat and stepped outside, the cold biting at his skin. The sidewalk was empty when he reached the corner, nothing but puddles and the echo of his own heartbeat. But the dread in his chest told him what he already feared: Daniel had not disappeared. The next morning confirmed it. Near the front door, Ryan found something that made his stomach drop. A stuffed penguin, torn open, stuffing spilling from its seams, a cruel imitation of the toy Emma loved. It was soaked from the rain, cold and heavy in his hands. This was no accident. It was a message. Emma's steps were light when she appeared in the hall, but when she saw it, she froze. She did not scream, did not cry. Her small hands shook as she whispered, "That is not mine. Mine is on the bed." Ryan placed the ruined toy into a plastic bag. His voice was steady, but his decision was final. "Ben," he said when his lawyer answered the phone, "we file for emergency guardianship today. I do not care what it takes. She is not going back." That night, Ryan sat at the table sorting through papers, medical reports, photos, Maya's testimony, all stacked beside the bagged evidence of the destroyed toy. Across the room, Emma colored silently, her penguin tucked tightly against her chest. The weight of the decision pressed on him, but beneath the weight was clarity. He had not stepped into that alley to become a father, but somewhere along the way, he had. Days later, the inevitable confrontation came. The buzzer rang late in the evening. Ryan frowned, tapping the screen by the door. Daniel's face appeared, unshaven, eyes bloodshot. "She is mine," he shouted through the intercom. Ryan called the police, but before they arrived, Daniel forced his way into the building. The pounding on the door shook the walls. "Open up, Mitchell! She belongs to me!" Emma scrambled from her blanket fort, hiding behind the kitchen island, her body curling into itself. Ryan approached the door calmly, his jaw tight. He pressed the intercom button. "You lost her the moment. You made her fear her own shadow." The silence that followed lasted only seconds before a crash sounded. Something had shattered against the door. Inside, Emma whispered through tears, "Please, don't let him take me." Ryan knelt and pulled her close. "He will never touch you again." Blue and red lights finally flashed against the windows. Officers swarmed the hallway, pulling Daniel back in handcuffs. He fought, cursed, his face twisted with fury, but he was powerless now. Emma peeked out from behind Ryan, her eyes meeting Daniel's for a fleeting second. For the first time, the man faltered, shame flickering before rage returned. Then he was dragged away, his shouts fading down the corridor. Emma trembled until Ryan crouched in front of her, taking her hands. "It is over," he said softly. "You are safe." Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she nodded, clutching his hands as though they were lifelines. When Maya arrived minutes later, drenched from the rain, she gathered Emma into her arms. Ryan stood back, watching them, something unshakable settling in his chest. He had fought for her, and he would keep fighting. The courtroom was another kind of battlefield. The lights buzzed overhead, the benches too large, the silence sharp. Ryan stood in a crisp suit, his heart pounding as he raised his hand to testify. His words came steady, laced with conviction. "I did not plan to become a father. I did not even know I needed to. But I heard her scream, and I could not walk away." He described the signs of abuse, the way Emma flinched at raised voices, the way she apologized for everything. Gasps rippled through the court. Evidence was presented: photos of bruises, medical notes, and the torn penguin, sealed in a plastic bag. The prosecutor called it what it was: a symbol of her stolen childhood. Then Emma was called forward. She held her penguin in one hand and a crayon drawing in the other. The drawing showed 3 figures: a tall man, a woman in Forder scrubs, and a small girl between them, all holding hands beneath a bright Sunday. At the top, in shaky orange letters, she had written, "My family now." The judge's eyes softened as she looked at Emma. "Do you want to stay with Mr. Mitchell?" she asked. Emma's voice was small, but steady. "They listen. They don't yell. I sleep better there." When the verdict came, Ryan's breath caught. Full guardianship granted. Daniel's parental rights revoked permanently. The gavel struck, and Emma turned to Ryan, her lips trembling. "Can I still call you Daddy?" Ryan knelt, looking into her wide, tearful eyes. "You always could," he said. She threw her arms around his neck, holding tight, and for the first time in years, Ryan did not feel empty. He felt whole. There are stories that begin in silence, in shadows, in the broken corners of the world where hope feels too far to reach. Emma's story began there, a child whose laughter was stolen, whose nights were filled with fear instead of dreams. But in one unexpected moment, someone chose to step forward instead of looking away. Ryan Mitchell, a man who once had everything and yet nothing, found the courage to stand between her and the darkness. What followed was not a fairy tale. It was messy, painful, filled with courtrooms, whispered fears, and the long road of healing. But within that road, something extraordinary took root. A child who thought love was dangerous learned that safety could be real. A man who thought he was destined to walk alone discovered that family is not built on blood, but on the choices we make every day. There is a truth hidden in this story that reaches far beyond one man and one little girl. It is the truth that every act of protection, every moment of kindness, every time we choose to fight for someone instead of ignoring their pain, we rewrite endings. The world is full of shadows, yes, but it is also full of people willing to bring light if they dare to step forward. Emma found her voice again, her laughter, her courage to call someone Daddy without fear. Ryan found purpose, warmth, and the realization that love had been waiting for him all along. Together they prove that no darkness is too deep when love decides to fight. If this story stirred something in your heart, let it be more than just a moment you watched. Let it be a reminder that compassion is powerful, that hope is alive, and that family can be found in the most unexpected places. These are the stories we tell, the stories that heal, the stories that remind us who we can be when we choose love over silence. Subscribe to the Retold Stories today, because every tale we share is a chance to remember that even when the night feels endless, the dawn is always waiting. And sometimes, all it takes is one choice, one act of courage to bring someone home.